Hi, this is Dan here. I hope you're doing really well. Now, this is kind of a follow-up lesson to one I've already done, which is just how to use arpeggios, modes, scales over this chord progression, which is basically I Will Survive and the same as Fly Me to the Moon. But in this lesson, I'm going to concentrate specifically on arpeggios, and I'm going to go through the ones you've got. As you can see here, we've got a minor, we've got a major, we've got -7 flat 5 or half diminished, and dominant. So we've got the 4 different types of arpeggios that you as a bass player are going to play a lot of. So I'm just going to go through them quickly. That's an A-7. There are plenty of shapes that you can do. We'll stick with this for now, and later on in the lesson I'll show you a couple of other things you can do. The next one's the same, D-7, which you could also play on the 10th fret of the E string. Then we've got G7. I'm starting that on the 3rd fret. You can download all of these shapes for free. I'll put a link down below, plus the backing track. But we'll do some things with the backing track and some without, because you know, I have to explain a few things first. Then we've got C-7. The next one's the same, F-7. So you just drop down, same fret, but on the A string. Then we've got this funny one, B-7 flat 5. Notice that's exactly the same shape as a B-7, but with a flat 5. So even though it looks like a confusing kind of mass of letters and numbers, what it says in the chord symbol tells you what to do. That's the flat 5 there. And then we've got an E7. So first of all, without the backing track, and without trying to make this sound too musical, let's just play the arpeggios up and down just through that progression. I actually had quite a few choices about where to go and what to play, but I just played them fairly simply there. There I went A-7 and D-7. Instead of going up on the same string to the 10th fret, I just dropped down to the same fret on the A string, the 5th fret. Same shape. Now every time you play an arpeggio, learn the chord symbols and the chord progression, and make sure that you know where you're going next. So it's a bit tricky here. So you've got to make sure that you know the shape really, really well. And you can either read the progression as you go, or as I'm doing here, just memorize it. But the tricky thing to do is, whilst you're playing, say for example, D-7, I know that G7 is next, and you've got to be ready for that. So I know that there's a G on the 3rd fret of the E string. There's also one on the 10th fret of the A string. I'll show you both ways. Watch this. Okay, so that time I was playing D-7 and targeting the G on the 3rd fret of the E string. I could equally just go up to the 10th fret of the A string though. See how it sounds quite pleasant as you're playing it. You know, I think if you do this kind of musical sounding exercises in your practice, it sounds good. Now, where you play an arpeggio, or anything for that matter on the bass, is going to depend. But I think, you know, just mix and match things up a little bit here. Yeah, sure, at first keep it simple. You know that there's a G there, target that one all the time. But then break out of that and, you know, go up the neck as I did there. Let's carry on. A C-7. Now this is a really nice chord progression because it has a root movement that's very common in music. You know, we're going from an A upper fourth to a D, upper fourth to a G, upper fourth to a G, you know. You can also go in that direction. It's doing something quite predictable that music very often does. So we can sort of use these patterns. When I was here on the G7, so there's my G. I know that I'm now going to a C. Now I'm going to an F, and a B, then E. See, once you figure out the movement, you'll see that everything is following a very familiar progression. Let's try that with the backing track. There are quite a few hand shifts going on here. I'll just explain a little bit of the technique behind this. I'm alternating fingers at all times here, or mostly actually. You know, going index, middle. So at the first one, you've got this lovely one finger per fret thing going on here, where you've got my first fingers on the 5th fret of the E string, A, and the other fingers line up on the consecutive frets. So here I've got fingers 1, then 4, then 3, then 1. That's a nice little arrangement going on there. Same on D-7. Here, when I get to the G, whether I go to the 10th fret A string or the 3rd fret E string with that same pattern, I have to do a hand shift, and that's an excellent thing for you to practice. So from the D-7. So I've got to get from the little finger being on the 8th fret, in this case, the second finger jumping to the G7. Let's isolate that little bit there. I mean, you can isolate further. I'm going to jump from this is an F, little finger on the F on the A string, to the G on the E string. And once I'm there, I can do 2, 1, 4, 2, 4. The finger numbers. And of course, I could jump to the G. That's just one tone or a whole step above the F. There I would have to go little finger on this F and just really confident quick shift. See how my hand is sort of set in this shape, this sort of one finger shape with these gaps between the fingers? It doesn't matter whether I'm going here or here, there's a hand shift involved. Then let's go G7 to C major 7. There's another shift. You want to make it seamless. You can see me nodding my head. There's no metronome or backing track. But if you do use the backing track or a metronome, then you're stuck to that, but which is good because you've got to get there smoothly without any dropping of the beat, without any gaps between things. And of course, just do it slowly at first. Now, when I was playing to the backing track, you may be thinking, well, that's too fast for me. That's fine. In that case, just slow things down like this. Just doing quarter notes there, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can even just inject a little bit more in as you go. Now, as you can hear, it sounds like I'm doing an exercise here, doesn't it? Because I am. I'm really not thinking about making this too musical. I do urge you to watch that lesson if you haven't already, the full lesson that I did on this, turning these ideas into bass lines. But for this lesson, I'm just going to stick to arpeggios, but I'm going to show you now how to make it a bit more musical. So you've done a bit of practice, you've learnt the shapes, you know where you're going, you've got your hand shifts down. Now we don't have to use all the notes that are within the arpeggio. Let me just remind you what an arpeggio actually is. We've got on the A-7, we've got a root, then we've got the third, which is a flat third in this case, then we've got a fifth, so we're just going 1, 3, 5, then 7, and then you've got an octave. But you don't have to go from the lowest note to the highest note. It sounds like you're doing an exercise if you do that. You don't have to play all the different chord tones within that shape. You can reduce, and I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to follow the same, arpeggios, but this time I might, stick a bit closer to the drums, make up my own groove, take a few notes away, and try and make it sound a little bit more musical, like a bass line. I was doing a few different things there, like at the end. I was playing around with rhythm there, okay? So there I was doing something quite syncopated, meaning not on the beat. These are the beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, sort of 16th note stuff there. If you just alter your rhythms, the same notes will start to sound a little different. You're playing with rhythm there. The other thing I was doing was just, I just did something like that where I did a root, the 5th, and the 7th and the octave, in this case a flat 7th. So I missed out the 3rd altogether. So I'm selecting notes from within the arpeggio shape, and I'm just creating a bass line from it, okay? In this case, 2 notes on that root. Adding in a little bit more articulation. So there's a hammer on there. Between the flat 7 and the octave, just pluck the first, then hammer down on the next. And continue with that idea. Exactly the same shape, exactly the same thing I'm doing, just on the D minor 7 now. I'm not playing a 3rd. Let's go to the G7, it's exactly the same pattern. Let's go to the C major 7. It's almost the same, but it's a major 7th. So we've got, instead of that flat 7, which would be on the same fret as your root note, always learn those patterns. Notice that the flat 7 is on the same fret as the root note, just sort of 2 strings this way. It's now 1 half step higher, okay? So it's almost the same pattern. The F major 7 is the same pattern. We've got the B minor 7 flat 5. I did some sort of syncopated rhythm on that. That's 2 bars of that one, so you can play around a bit with that. Now, another thing is that when I am, playing whichever one I'm playing, so for example, a good place to highlight this, F major 7. I know that the B minor 7 flat 5 is next. I know that there's a B here, and I have to nail that on beat 1. So as I'm playing, I'm practicing hitting that on beat 1 without missing it. Partly that is to get your finger ready. Okay, always have that. Something I've got a new course that's called From Beginner to Bassist, and I go through loads of stuff like this, using theory, technique, going from absolute basics, or if you haven't played bass for years, taking you from there to really, really good sort of place. Actually, it's probably an intermediate course as well. But in that course and in a lot of these lessons, I use this phrase, one finger in the future. Okay, so if I'm on this F major 7, I'm sort of around the 9th and the 10th frets here, but this B is on fret 7. Watch this. As I'm playing the last note of my little line in this section, my first finger, it's already there. It's already over the B. That way, I'm going to hit it in time, on that beat 1. The same thing happens with my plucking hand fingers. I've got a finger ready. So always think about this concept, one finger in the future. Combine that with hand shifts, and that's how you'll get, your playing a little bit more fluid, a little bit more accurate, is to work on technique and timing. There's a good relationship between those two things, If you play very, very simple notes in time, it sounds great. But if you play some stuff like in this lesson, a little bit more intricate, then your technique has to be there. In this lesson so far, I've only just played around with the shapes that you've got in the PDF that I showed you earlier. But don't forget that there are different ways of playing the same thing on a bass, and you should try and connect these shapes up that way as well. But for now, just stick to what I've shown you. But I'm going to finish with showing you this without the backing track. A very nice way of maneuvering between different chords, different arpeggios, without having to hit the root every time. It's quite a nice sounding thing. I'll show you what I mean. Look. Now there I went I hit the flat third of the D minor 7 arpeggio. I didn't go to the root. It sounds quite classical almost. What I'm doing here is just going through it just in my head, just sort of hitting the next arpeggio, but whatever the first, the third, the fifth, or the seventh, whichever note's closest to where I happen to be, okay? And if you wanted, it really creates a nice, smooth, classical music sounding vibe, and it's good to get you out of just hitting a root every time. So if you're doing walking bass lines, this is a good thing for that. But I think if you really, really know the shapes and you really can see them. Okay, look there. If I stop on the fifth of the A minor 7, that's 1/2 step away from the flat third of the D minor 7. It sounds complicated to say it, but when you actually sit down and play this, you'll see the pattern, okay? And slow things down, you know. I'm targeting, there's that G7. Maybe I'll shift up to the major third of the G7. I'm just mucking around here, just playing different rhythms, and I'm not really thinking about getting it in time. I'm just coming up with musical sounding things, okay? That would be a little bit of a step up from just doing the root position shapes I've shown you, but you can have loads of fun with that too. Okay, I think that's enough for now, but if you do have any questions based on this, do leave a comment below and I'll get back to you. Please do, if you got anything from that video, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.